Sekira secara maksimum keterangan diberikan ketika pembelaan kes selain pertuduhan juga telah dibuktikan terhadap tertuduh mengikut Seksyen 302 Kanun Keseksaan.
Firstly, we will go through a chronology of the case. In this case, the accused was a jobless named Abdul Malik bin Rosli, while the deceased was a dental technician named Mahusin, 27 years old. The accused became acquainted with the deceased through the social media application, which is WeChat. Their communication developed over time, and eventually, the deceased offered the accused a job opportunity. Trusting this offer, Abdul Malik traveled by bus to meet Mahusin at his staff quarters in Lukut. The case began on the evening of 18 January 2018 when the victim was last seen after completing his shift at the Klinik Kesihatan Lukut. His absence from work in the days that followed raised concern among colleagues. On the morning of 22nd January 2018, after Mahusin had failed to report for duty for several days, a college conducted a safety check at his staff quarters and discovered his lifeless body lying on a mattress with a pillow over his face. The forensic team that arrived at the scene noted severe cranial fractures, blood pooling beneath the mattress, and a lack of defensive wounds. Partially, an entomologist report concluded that the estimated time of death was 2 to 3 days before the body was found based on the development stage of fly larvae at the scene. This placed the likely time of death between 19 and 20 January 2018, separating the prosecution's timeline. Following the discovery, investigators found no eyewitnesses but collected cigarette butts and hair from the room, which later returned a DNA match to Abdul Malik bin Rosli. Simultaneously, Mahusin's motorcycle, wallet, ATM card and personal belongings were found missing. CCTV footage and transaction records from local ATMs revealed that Abdul Malik had used the victim's ATM card and was captured on video at petrol station and banks in the Port Dickson area. Abdul Malik was arrested on 31st January 2018 in possession of the victim's motorcycle, ATM card and helmet. The prosecution charged him under Section 302 of the Penal Code for murder. The trial proceeded primarily on circumstantial evidence as no fingerprints or DNA were found on the murder weapon itself. Nevertheless, the High Court accepted the prosecution's evidence including DNA, digital footprints and possession of stolen items as forming a rope of circumstantial proof that was strong enough to convict. Abdul Malik was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. The judgment, delivered in October 2022, and emphasized the convergence of forensic science, digital evidence, and consistent timelines as critical to securing the conviction.
As we move on to the defense of the suspect, in the case of Pendakwa Raya versus Abdul Malik bin Rosli, the accused Abdul Malik bin Rosli raised several points in his defense during the trial. Firstly, the accused denied having any intention to kill the deceased. Mahusin bin Abdul Rahim, he admitted to striking the deceased but claimed that his sole intention was to escape from the apartment and to prevent the deceased from stopping him. He testified that the act was done in a moment of anger and frustration and not with any murderous intent. According to the accused, he used a helmet to strike the deceased while the latter was laying in bed. He insisted that he had no intention to cause death, only to escape from what he described as a threatening situation. Secondly, the accused alleged that he had been sexual assaulted by the deceased. He testified that after meeting through WeChat application, he travelled to Port Dickson upon the deceased's invitation with a promise of the job. During his stay at the deceased's apartment, the accused claimed that he was subjected to multiple acts of forced sexual activity, including oral sex and anal intercourse. He described being emotionally distressed, ashamed, and traumatized by these encounters, stating that he initially froze during the assault and later complained out of fear and helplessness. The accused claimed that he had been held against his will. He alleged that the deceased locked the front grille of the apartment, leaving him unable to leave during the day. He further stated that he had no money and was dependent on the deceased's help in finding employment, which made him feel trapped. In addition to the denying intent, the defense also attempted to raise a reasonable doubt by suggesting the possibility that another unknown individual could have entered the apartment after the accused had left. The accused stated that he left the door unlocked thereby opening the possibility that someone else might have been responsible for the fatal injuries inflicted on the deceased. Furthermore, the defense questioned the reliability of the DNA evidence. The defense counsel pointed out that although many cigarette butts were recovered from the scenes, only 3 were sent for DNA analysis. They argue that this selective testing could undermine the reliability and completeness of the evidence used to place the accused at the crime.
Now I will explain about the court decision. In the case of Pendakwa Raya versus Abdul Malik bin Rosli, the court found Abdul Malik bin Rosli was guilty of murder and sentenced him to the death by hanging. The deceased Mahusin bin Abdul Rahim died from multiple blunt force injuries to the head, which caused skull and jaw fractures, leading to internal bleeding and brain damage. The autopsy report confirmed that the injuries were not self-inflicted, but it was caused by a blunt object such as a helmet or fire extinguisher. Entomological evidence placed that the time of death around 18 January 2018, approximately 4 days before the body was discovered. Besides, although there was no direct evidence to the crime, the court used a strong evidence to prove that Abdul Malik was responsible. His DNA was found in hair strands and cigarette butts at the scene, and he was caught in possession of the deceased's belongings, including his motorcycle, ID, and bank cards after Mahusin had died. Bank records also show transactions made using the deceased's cards, placing Abdul Malik in Johor Bahru around the time of the murder. The court believed that Abdul Malik had intended to kill based on the brutality of the attack, the numbers of blows, and the targeting of the head, showing a clear plan to cause death. There was no signs that Mahusin tried to defend himself because he was asleep when attacked. Abdul Malik claimed he hit Mahusin because he wanted to escape, and he said he was forced to captivity and sexual assault. However, his story was not accepted because there was no proof of injury on him, no attempt to run away, and his action after the incident, like calmly collecting the deceased's belongings, did not match to someone who acting out of fear or desperation. Therefore, the court convicted the accused of murder and sentenced him to the death by hanging as required by the law for the offence of murder under Section 302 of Penal Code.
This case have 3 types of evidence. The most important part is medical and forensic science evidence that analyze the evidence by autopsy, entomology, and DNA profiling. Also, the documentary and physical exhibits which helps to determine the victim's belonging, bank records, and witness timeline in this case. However, medical and forensic science evidence were the most important in helping the authorities to estimate the time of death and cause of the death. This evidence was conducted by 3 techniques, which are the first one was autopsy. An autopsy was conducted by Dr. Hanif, and the findings of the autopsy showed that the deceased have multiple blunt force fractures to the base of the skull, jaw, right temple, and cheekbone. This analysis also determines that there was no defensive wound, and Dr. Hanif estimates that the deaths were 36 hours before the autopsy was conducted. Next, entomology analysis was conducted by Dr. Nazni, and she used the maggot that had been collected during the autopsy. She identifies 2 species of maggot, which are Carpisomnia megacephala and Megacelia scalarisis. The presence of third instar of Megacelia larvae estimate the eggs were laid around 4 days before the autopsy, which occurred on 22 January 2018. This helped in estimating the dates of the deceased was on the 18 January 2018. And the last one was DNA profiling conducted by the chemistry department. From the analysis, the DNA of the accused was found on the hair and 3 cigarette butts that had been found at the crime scene. However, there was no foreign DNA found in the bedroom, helmet, or fire extinguisher. Next is about how entomology had been applied in this case. First step, where the maggots were collected from the body and sent to an expert, which is entomologist Dr. Nazni, after an autopsy. She identified two types of maggots, which is Chrysomia megacephala, which is commonly known as the oriental latrine fly, and Megacelia sclerosis, known as the coffin fly. These maggots go through stages of development called insta, and based on the stage, she estimated that the eggs were laid around 4 days before the autopsy, which was done on 22 January 2018. The presence of maggot on the body of the deceased, Mahusin, played a very important role in helping the court determine the time of his death. Since the body was found in the state of decomposition, it was difficult to estimate exactly when he had died. This analysis helped in determining the death occurred on or about 18 January 2018. This scientific finding helped the court establish a key timeline in the case. It supported the prosecution argument that the accused was the last person seen with the deceased and directly linked him to the murder. The maggot evidence also helped discredit the defense's version, where the accused claimed he attacked the victim on the night of 17 January 2018 and left him alive. Since the maggot showed that happened later, this suggests that the accused must have caused the fatal injuries and the victim didn't survive the attack. Also, this evidence helped in confirming the accused was left from Port Dickson before morning on 19 January, and the victim's bank card was used from 19 January onwards. Therefore, the maggot evidence was crucial in providing the time of the death and supporting the conclusion that the accused was responsible for the murder.
Going to the final recommendation and implementation plan. Firstly, I recommend that the collection of entomological evidence be made mandatory in all homicide investigation where the body is found in a decomposed state. To implement this, standard operating procedures must be developed and enforced for crime scene investigators. These procedures should outline the proper techniques for identifying, collecting, and preserving insect specimens such as maggots, fly eggs, and pupae. In addition, forensic officers must receive specialized training in entomological sampling, ensuring that this biological evidence is handled accurately and consistent from the crime scene to the laboratory. This recommendation is justified by the fact that, in this case, the forensic entomologist determined that the victim died around 18 January 2018, which directly contradicted the accused's claim and supported the prosecution timeline. Without this evidence, it would have been harder to disprove the defense. Secondly, I recommend the establishment of National Forensic Entomology Database. This database should include development of data for local insect species such as Chrysomia megacephala and Megacelia scalaris under different environmental and climatic conditions. This database can be maintained by a central forensic science agency or a university in collaboration with the Institute for Medical Research. By creating this database, forensic entomologists across the country will have access to standardized reference data to improve the accuracy of post-mortem interval estimation. This will lead to greater consistency in court testimonies and forensic reports. Lastly, I propose that forensic entomology be fully integrated into the education and training of forensic science professionals. This means that forensic science and forensic pathology degree program should include forensic entomology as a core subject. In addition, regular interdisciplinary workshop and short courses should be conducted to bring together forensic pathologists, entomologists, law enforcement officers, and legal practitioners. This collaborative session will ensure that everyone involved in the criminal justice process understands the significance of entomological evidence and how to use effectively in court. The justification for this recommendation lies in the high credibility of entomologists' testimony in this case. Because the evidence was well documented, supported by the scientific reasoning, and presented clearly, it was accepted by the court as reliable and contribute significantly to the judge's decision. This showed the importance of not only collecting such evidence, but also having professionals who are well trained to interpret and explain it clearly in a legal settings.
In conclusion, the case of Penawar Raya against Abdul Malik bin Rosli ended with a conviction for murder under Section 302 of the Penal Code. Although there were no eyewitnesses, the prosecution relied on strong circumstantial evidence. DNA from cigarette butts and hair found at the scene matched the accused. Forensic entomology helped estimate the time of death, which aligned with the accused movements. CCTV footage and ATM record show Abdul Malik using the victim's car and riding his stolen motorcycle. The court found the injuries on the victim's head were intentional and fatal. The High Court sentenced the accused to death. However, in March 2025, the Court of Appeal reduced the sentence to 30 years imprisonment and 12 strokes of the cane. The sentence was backdated to the date of arrest. This case shows how forensic science and digital evidence can strongly support a murder conviction. It proved that even without direct witnesses, a clear and consistent chain of evidence can lead to a just outcome.